always dancing behind the scenes to our welcome music, and I am glad to welcome you here today to The Way Home, Crossnore Communities for Children's Facebook Live show, as well as our podcast. My name is Holly Kessler, and I serve as the Senior Director of Community Relations at Crossnore. We are here on Facebook every Tuesday afternoon talking with some of our staff members or perhaps a community partner about the work that we do, the child welfare system, and ways that we're engaging in our community. So if you miss our live show, you can always rewatch on Facebook or catch the show on our YouTube channel. The podcast comes out on Fridays on our blog at crossnore.org. So there are plenty of ways to interact with our show each week, and we are super glad that you're here. Today's guest is Joe Torrence from The Open Table. The Open Table is one of Crossnore's community partners, and Joe is the Director of Community Relations for The Open Table, and he's going to tell us more about his job and about the organization itself. So join me in welcoming Joe to the show today. Hey, Joe.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Holly. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm sorry?
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're delighted that you're here. We have been in a relationship with The Open Table for about a year now. And so we're excited to tell folks about it. And maybe we can gather a few more volunteers when they know more about it. But Joe, start out by introducing yourself. Tell us about your role at The Open Table and what The Open Table is.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Joe Torrence, and I am the Director of Community Relations for The Open Table. And we are a community organizing, grassroots, bottom-up organization that trains volunteers how to use their social assets and their relationships, their skills, their gifts, their resources, and their networks to help someone else, typically folks who are in situations often beyond their control and situations that often seem pretty hopeless. And so one of the things that we do is to help to provide hope through the power of relationship and community. Open Table believes that relationships truly have the power to transform us. And so that's what we do.
That is awesome. And you're so right about the power of relationships. I think we see that in our own lives every day. Where would we be without the close, important relationships that we have, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. And unfortunately, for lots of the folks that we serve and work with, they just they don't have those relationships. Right. And so, so there's lots of different poverty. Right. Yes. And the poverty of relationship is certainly one of those.
Well, tell us what the official mission of The Open Table is and how you guys fulfill that mission.
Sure. Yeah. So we exist to help bring folks who are in poverty out. And we do that in ways that are sustainable and not in such a way that's a transactional sort of thing, but more of a transformational one. We truly believe that it is better to teach someone to fish than to fish for them. And so that's really what Open Table kind of works to do. And we do that by using volunteers to use their relationships, their networks, their skills, folks that they are connected to, but to use those things instead of for their own good, for the good of somebody else. And so, and that's what we do. And so we are currently in 33 states across the country and are really, really excited to be partnering with Crossnore in North Carolina. And so, yeah.
So as we think about then the ways that you help people, obviously you would be working with, some of our older teenagers who have experience and are currently living in foster care, maybe getting ready to age out of foster care, or maybe even they have aged out but are still receiving services from Crossnore. And so talk about how those relationships are built around a table, like The name of the organization is the Open Table. So y'all talk about, a young adult being involved with a table of adults. So how does that work?
Yeah, sure. So it works in a couple of different ways. But if you kind of think of it in terms of often kids who are in the foster care system, um, they are exiting it, whether it's because they are choosing to do so when they turn 18, or because they have aged out because they're now too old. Often, what happens is that these young people are left without any real significant connections with folks, and so without those connections and without those relationships, navigating life can be really, really difficult, and kind of launching into adulthood can be really, really hard. And for most of us, we're lucky enough to have parents or grandparents or a community of folks who care enough about us to kind of teach us soft skills, right? How to apply for a job, how to get an apartment, how to manage a checkbook or a checking account, how to get a driver's license, right? All of these things that someone has probably helped you to do at some point in your journey. What we find to be true is that for lots of our young folk who are exiting the foster care system, they don't have those skills, and it really puts folks in a deficit when we talk about launching into adulthood. And so, what Open Table does is that it puts a table of volunteers, typically anywhere from 4 to 8 volunteers, around a young person to help them navigate the next year of their life, right? And so they walk with them in that journey, and that journey takes lots of different forms. Maybe it's finding a job, maybe it's getting into college, maybe it's finding an apartment. Whatever the needs of the young person, that's what a table helps them to do. And so it's not really a social service per se, because these relationships don't have boxes to check off, right? And it's not those sorts of things, but it really is more of a mutual relationship where these young folks develop connections that will hopefully last a lifetime. And so, and when you're talking about young people who often don't have any of those connections, this can be transformational for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for them and for the volunteers, right? And so,
well, absolutely. And as often as I've heard you talk about this, Joe, you oftentimes tell folks that it's not mentoring. Can you explain why it's not? Why y'all don't use that word, and why it's not sort of that traditional mentoring that we often think about?
Yeah, sure. So, when you think about the mentoring and mentoring relationships are great relationships, right? And there are certainly times and places for those. But for what we do at Open Table, a mentoring relationship assumes that the mentor, so let's just use me, for example, that I have all of this knowledge and information, and I'm going to bestow it upon someone else, right? And so, what that assumes is that I have all the information, and the person that I'm working with doesn't, right? And so therefore, I'm giving it to them. But with Open Table, it is really more of a reciprocal relationship. That yes, I have things that I can teach this young person, but they have equally as much, if not more, that they can teach me, right? The goal with Open Table is not just that the person who, and we call them the friend, that not just that the friend is being served, but in a lot of ways, the volunteers are being served as well, that we are both in this journey together to be transformed, right? To be made different. And so, so that's why we use this language of relationship, being intentional about that, as opposed to kind of a mentoring sort of thing.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that, the young adult is called the friend, not a mentee, or, not a kid that needs help, or, but they're a friend, because really it is about building relationships around that table, just like friends do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's different from like a service that maybe they have received in the past, right? So if they've had caseworkers or if they've had
Mhm.
organization, whatever, wherever it is that they're coming from, often there are checklists, right? Like there are things that they have to accomplish in order to kind of get to the next step of the journey.
Yeah.
But with Open Table, it really isn't about checking off the boxes. Like it is really about the relationships, and,
Right.
and 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 those relationships are kind of the catalyst for everything else that happens, right? That things happen because of the relationship,
Mhm. Mhm.
and not kind of the opposite, where
Yeah.
you check off the boxes first, and then I
Right.
invest, right? And so
Yeah. And
um,
if there are check boxes, they're check boxes that the friend has picked, right? So it's
that's
like
exactly
their
right.
goals, what they want to accomplish, what they feel like they need assistance with.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, if you think about it in terms of kind of a business,
Mhm.
the young person is really the CEO of their table and their board of directors. And so the volunteers are really the board of directors that are helping the young person, the
Mhm.
friend, accomplish exactly what
Right.
they want to accomplish,
Right.
right? Even if it's not necessarily what I would pick for them to accomplish,
Right.
right? And so and that's really something that is pretty striking
Mhm.
and different about the open table
Mhm.
model, is
Mhm.
that it is the voice and the choice
Mhm.
of the young person,
Mhm.
and not me, right, as
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
as the support. So
Yeah, and I appreciate that you making that point that even if I think the young person should be doing something else, like it is their life. And so the more inclusive way to interact is to find out about them and about their
that's right.
history and about what their life goals are and where they want to end up in their life. And then how can you come alongside that? So I
Yeah,
just
that's
love
exactly right.
that
Yeah,
perspective. And you also mentioned, a lot of kids that age out of foster care, have not been taught a lot of those skills. And I will say, even at Crossnore, where we have programs like our Youth Independent Living program, where we try to teach kids, help them to learn those skills about budgeting and healthy nutrition and that kind of thing. But it's a little bit like being their parent. When we're all we're 15, 16, 18, 19, whatever, how well did we listen to our parents, right?
right,
But
right.
somebody else could come in and say the exact same thing, and all of a sudden, like the light bulb comes on.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
yeah,
That's right. And you hear it in a different way, right?
right.
Like it's one thing for my social worker or caseworker
Mhm.
or whoever to tell
Yeah,
me to do something, and surely they want what's best for me as well. But
right,
but it's different when it's a caring adult um, who is there by choice and not because they necessarily have to be,
right.
investing the time and investing the energy, and for whatever reason, like we just hear it differently. We hear
Yeah,
it differently,
we
and
do.
we probably all had those sorts of relationships, right? Like there
Absolutely.
there were plenty of times when I was a kid that my mom and dad would tell me to do something, but and I did it, but I would listen to my youth minister, right, because
Right.
he had better hair or
Right.
whatever, right?
Or
And so
whatever. Exactly.
and, and
Yeah.
so it's the same thing with Open Table, right? That
Yeah.
and what's fascinating is for years, the social service arena has really
Hmm.
been trying to figure out this whole wraparound thing, and
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
how it is, particularly with kids who are aging out. Like, how do we wrap around these kids so that they don't fall
Right.
into so that they don't fall into the gaps, right? And
Right.
so, and what Open Table does is that it gives a way that can be repeated over and over again
Hmm.
to help kids and provide that kind of wraparound
Hmm.
support that we know that young people need from when the services end to when they launch into adulthood. There is this space that without those relationships, the chances of them falling through the cracks are pretty high. And
Yes.
so Open Table really helps for that not to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talked a lot about what the volunteers bring to the table, and you mentioned social assets, or sometimes we call it social capital.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes when I talk with folks about the open table, it's easy to sort of jump to the conclusion that well, we can help solve their problems with money. But it's
Mm,
not about that kind of capital, right?
right. That's exactly right.
What
I
do you
mean,
mean by social capital and how does that work in lieu of money?
yeah, yeah, great question. I mean, so the truth is, right, like that if money were the solution, then we would have solved poverty decades ago, right? And obviously that hasn't been the case. And so there's like the missing ingredient, right? There's the missing sauce. And for Open Table, that missing sauce is social capital. So what that means is the relationships, the networks, and the skills that I possess as a human being, right? Um,
Mhm.
and often what happens is with that social capital, like I'll use it for myself, right? Or maybe I'll use it for a family member or somebody. Like I'll connect a friend to a friend. But what Open Table does is that it takes my social capital and it expands it so that the young person can use it, right? So
Mhm.
so I give access to this young person of my networks, of the people that
Mhm.
I know, of the skills that I have,
Mhm.
of the resources that I have. And
Right.
again, not necessarily financial, right? Like maybe
Right.
it's the resource of time, or it's the
Mhm.
resource of being able to that I have a driver's license and so I can drive you places, or whatever those resources may be. Is that it's giving these young folk, these young people, access to that capital.
Mhm.
And it's not just mine, but it's the other 4 to 8 volunteers that are on
Mhm.
that table, right? So
Mhm.
if you put that in perspective a little bit, so let's just assume that every person who serves as a volunteer has 20 contacts in their phone, right?
Mhm.
And so let's assume that those 20 contacts also have 20 contacts. Well, before you know it, you've got about 4,000 connections there,
Yeah.
from just the 4 to 8 volunteers that are sitting around that table.
Yeah.
Now imagine a young person who is aging out having access to those 4,000 connections, right?
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
difference that could be made through that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's what we work to do. That's what we
Yeah.
work to do.
And it just becomes exponential from there.
Right.
And as we've all seen in our own lives, the fortuitous introduction to somebody that maybe has gone on down the road to play a significant role in our life. And so we're all already utilizing that social capital that we have with one another.
Hmm.
Now we're just looking for folks that are willing to utilize that with some young adults who need that kind of support. When you were
Hmm.
talking, I was thinking about the things that my kids, especially as very young adults, they're older now, but the kinds of things they would call me, they're living on their own, but they would call
Hmm.
me when their car broke down,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so what would I do? Well, I would send them to my mechanic.
Hmm.
And I have a great mechanic, right here in Winston-Salem where I live. And so if I was on a table and the friend's car broke down, that's exactly what I would do. I would just send them to my mechanic
That's right.
because they don't, maybe they don't have the experience to know where they can get their car even looked at, So
Right.
it's that kind of thing.
Or to how to even to begin that process, right?
Right.
Like that's and maybe a young person might be lucky enough to have a caseworker who cares that much about them that that they would. But often, like caseworkers, have 50 other
Right. Right.
right, I mean that's a great example, right? And
Yeah.
so I mean, in fact, so we had this young person that we were working with on a table, and before the table started, he had three contacts. He had
Mm.
his two caseworkers and his grandmother,
Hmm.
and that was it. And so started meeting with the table, and about 2 weeks into the experience, he really connected with one of the table members. It happened to be another gentleman, and so,
Hmm.
but unfortunately, his grandmother passed away. And don't you know, like he tried to call the two caseworkers, couldn't get in touch with them, and the first person he called was the person on his table,
Hmm.
and he called them because because this kid, I mean, he was 18 years old at the time, had no idea what to do. I mean,
Right.
he was grieving because he had just lost the only other person that was in his contact, right? Like
Mhm.
his only other connection. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, that person's not there, and now what does he do, right? Like
Mhm.
he didn't know anything. He didn't know, and luckily, this table was able to walk with this young man through his grief and
Mhm.
helped him plan his grandmother's funeral and all
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you know, that's a terrible sort of situation, but you know, at least he had somebody else that was walking with him through that process. And
Absolutely.
um,
And I think about that story too. I think about it in terms of even providing a layer of safety for
mhm.
a young adult that's in a situation where they've experienced grief and loss and they could easily be taken advantage of.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so to have a more seasoned adult walking along with them to do something like plan a funeral or even other things, there's certainly in the example of needing your car fixed,
Mhm.
there are some folks out there that aren't particularly honest that work on
Right,
cars.
right, right.
So I
Or
just think
getting an
that
apartment, right? Getting an
right,
apartment is a great
right.
example, right?
Hmm.
Like if you let's say that you have been in the foster care system for some time and
Hmm.
you've been from placement to placement to placement to placement. We know what that kind of trauma can do to just the brain and the way that you develop as a person, and so it is really easy for these kids who are aging out to be taken advantage of because they don't know the right questions to ask or even
Hmm.
where to start, and so particularly in finding safe, affordable housing.
Hmm.
Um, Gosh, like if you don't know and if no one has ever taught you, eh,
Yeah,
that's a daunting task, right?
absolutely.
And so,
Absolutely.
um, yeah, and
Yeah,
so
that's a great example too. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that story. I was going to ask you for a story, and you beat me to it. But I love that story. Yeah, I've heard you tell it before, but just what a role that table was able to play in that young man's life. And so, as Crossnore and the Open Table have been working together, obviously we're looking for more volunteers. And so, maybe to sort of meet that. Call for volunteers, we are embarking upon a conference that we're going to have next February. So tell us about the Move conference, Joe, and
yeah.
what that's going to be about, what people can learn when they come there.
Yeah, yeah. No, we are really, really excited about this
Mhm.
conference because it is designed for churches in particular,
Right.
for pastors and any lay people, staff who have a heart for young people, particularly for kids who are in the foster care system who are aging out. And so this conference is going to be a one-day event in Thursday, February the 11th, I believe, is the
16th,
oh,
February
sorry.
16th.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thursday, February 16th. And
Yep.
so it's going to be a one-day conference there on the campus in Winston-Salem of Crossnore. And the goal of the conference is to truly give churches the tools for ways that they can help support one young person move into adulthood.
Mhm.
Because I think that this is accurate, but I think that there's something like 10,000 churches in the state of North Carolina, right? And
Mhm.
I think or it may even be more than that, but as of last year, there are something like 16,000 young people in the foster care system in the state of North Carolina. And I believe, and we believe, Crossnore too, that the church can do something about that if
Mhm.
given the right tools and the right connections and the right resources. And so we're really excited to be partnering with Crossnore in the Move conference and to give churches exactly those things, to give them the resources and tools that they need to help one young person launch successfully into
Mhm.
adulthood. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, so hope folks
It's
will
going to be
join
a
us.
I hope so too. It's going to be a fun day. In addition to the Open Table and Crossnore, our sponsors are Healthy Blue and the State Employees Credit Union. Did I get them all,
Yeah, I
Joe?
think, yeah, Sec you. And yeah, that's right.
Thank you. And Healthy Blue. So we're excited about them being with us on that day. We'll
Absolutely.
learn some more about the child welfare system. We'll learn more about how the Open Table works. We'll have some fellowship and some food, and even do a simulation on how a table will work.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So
Yeah.
people will see firsthand and really kind of get to experience what it looks
Yeah.
like to use your social capital for the benefit of somebody
Mhm.
else. And
Mhm.
so it really is going to be one of those conferences where you're walking away with tools to use and great partners to partner with. And so
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, we're really excited about it.
Yeah. So anybody that can come that day, you can find the registration on our website at crossnore.org. We'll have that link in the show notes as well. But we would love for you to join us on February the 16th, learn more about the Open Table and how you can plug in. And then we'll ask you kind of at the end of that day to indicate, where you're at in terms of your level of interest or commitment to wanting to know more. So we're super
Yeah.
excited about it and hope you guys will join us. Well, Joe, if folks want to know more about the Open Table itself, where can they find that out?
Yeah, sure. So our website is the best place to go. It is www.theopentable.org, theopentable.org. And there are a ton of resources on there. We've been around for almost 17 years now. And
Wow.
so not only do we have this model, but we have the data to back up how successful it is.
Mhm, mhm.
And so it's not just stories about how awesome Open Table is. We literally have the data to back it up.
Right.
And we put a lot of work into collecting that data. And so
Mhm.
so I encourage everybody to go check it out. You can learn more about how Open Table got started, and what we're up to. And so www.theopentable.org.
Great. Well, I hope folks will visit your website and learn more about it. And I hope too that folks will register for the MOVE conference. Joe, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you guys for being a partner with Crossnore. Thank you for all the work that you are doing in the lives of these friends that come around the table. And we look forward to more work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Holly, thank you so much for this time, and thank you for the terrific partnership that we have with Crossnore. We couldn't be more excited to be doing this work with you all, and so really excited about the future and about really making a difference in the lives of young people in North Carolina. Like that's
Mhm.
what this is all about, and so
Absolutely.
and I know that you all have that same heartbeat. So I'm excited.
Well, we are too. So thank you again, Joe. As I've thanked our guests for today, let me also say thanks to each of you who are watching or listening. We appreciate the opportunity to tell you about Crossnore and about the work that we do. So for more information, please visit our website at crossnore.org or follow us on our social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. That's it for today, but I hope you will join us again next week on the way home.